All right, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us at the International ACAC pre-recorded session. Today we're going to go through pitching a pilot project and how to ensure success. Today on our panel we've got myself, my name's Matt Stigmeyer. We'll hear from counseling side from Karen at International School Manila and Craig from Shawnigan Lake. And then we're going to hear from the university side, Megan from the Huron at Western, and then myself from Concordia. We're going to jump right into it. Of course, we're doing this a little different this time because obviously when you're dealing with time zones and international recruitment, and yet trying to put something together that brings people together across the world, you have to make some adjustments. We should be all used to that by now. And so we've got pre-recorded portion from Karen to kind of kick us off. So we're going to let her jump right into it, talk about how she came up with an idea to pitch to her administration, how she was successful in implementing her project. And then we're going to go through a couple of different examples of how you can organize your thoughts and make sure that you're making the most out of an impact when you're thinking about new ideas. And certainly this upcoming recruitment cycle is going to be all about how do we do things differently, because it looks like COVID is definitely going to challenge the status quo. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen.
So at ISM, a small case study, we have about 200 students in the graduating class. They are going to university all around the world. The United States, Canada are two of our bigger markets, UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Asia. Philippines is usually in our top 5 countries as well. And we have about 25% of our students are looking at and applying to more than 2 countries. And so there's a lot of questions that come up around the university search process, and we wanted to be more deliberate. And so when thinking about proposing and piloting a project, in this case, it was to address this issue of curriculum time with students. We didn't have any, and really saw that there was a need to have more contact with students. And we didn't have through the one-on-one counseling sessions that there was big picture information that all students would be, or just not just information, but activities all students would really benefit from. So step 1 is identifying what is the problem. In our case, it was creating a curriculum, and more so finding time for that. We're an IB school, so students are very busy and just don't have much unscheduled time during the school week. Going from that, so I'm a part of a counseling team of 7 counselors, 2 grade 9, 10 counselors, and 5 grade 11, 12 counselors. We're comprehensive, and so the 11, 12 counselors also do the university search. And at sessions and at conferences, there's many things to be inspired by when you hear about what your colleagues and coworkers around the world are doing. And in my case, it was the New Jersey IACAC, and I went to a session about these university classes. I wasn't at ISM at that point. But it planted seeds and, made me really think that would be ideal, to have time with students where we're dedicating it to the university search process and eventually the application process. So talking with peers, talking to colleagues at peer universities and peer schools, or even ones that aren't necessarily your peers, just to hear what are they doing and get the idea out there, to really feel inspired and see the possibilities, and considering what is the best practices within the field. And then once you have that inspiration, so this all culminated for me at the November CIF BNS conference. Once you have that inspiration, once you've done those conversations, you get the idea, it's really important to use that momentum. And so in my case, I flew back from that conference probably a bit jet lagged. I started talking about my ideas with the head of the counseling department. He said, write a proposal. So I worked on a proposal. I showed it to him. We went through a lot of that together. He gave me feedback. Worked on that some more. Eventually, 2 weeks later of returning, pitched that to the high school administration, principal and vice principal. Got approval and spent a week of curriculum planning with the counseling team, and we led our first classes 2 months after I returned from the CIF conference. So that's just to give you that timeline. Not everything moves that fast. but really going from idea to implementation in this case was about using that momentum both to pitch as well as get started. So when pitching, when putting together the proposal, it's so important to organize your ideas. So what is your idea? In our case, it was this weekly curricular time. Why this? We wanted to increase student engagement in the university search process. We wanted them to have a better understanding of their needs and desires for university, and understand just how it's not the same in every country. Yes, you are graduating with a degree that would be recognized most of the time all around the world, but we want you to understand the differences in culture and application process and requirements depending on where it is that you're applying. So really look deeply at the schedule where students had a lot of pockets of time, because that was our issue. It was never that no one valued what we wanted to do, but it was finding the time to do it. And in this proposal, it was making that case, saying these are the lessons that we want, and here's how we're going to be able to do it. So created a plan, really looked at that big picture planning, the philosophy and reasoning, and making the case in writing for that, as well as that curricular overview. So before we started writing the actual classroom curriculum, went through, here's what we'd be doing quarter by quarter. There was logistics to plan and to be able to present, already showing that this is something that the counseling team is thinking of. So what week would we run the class? What days of the week? Would it be every single study block or just some of them? How would we find classroom space because there's not very much available? Who would be teaching the class? All of that. Who would be planning the classes? So really having that information ready for the pitch and proposal. And even beforehand, and this is where it was really helpful to be working with the head of my department, is consider the counter arguments from your administration or from your boss or from the director. Know your audience, know what types of questions they will usually ask. Do they want data? Do they want big picture? In our case, they were asking, how are you going to get student buy-in because you're taking study time away from them, free time away from them? How will, their big concern is that counselors are out of the office, so how will counselors still be able to support individual students when there's a crisis that happens? So we were really prepared for what are the questions they're going to ask, how can we have that information or that data ahead of time to be able to put it out there and share it in that meeting and during that pitch. So we got approval within that short period of time, and rather than waiting until quarter one or the beginning of the school year to do this, as you can see here, we initially planned quarter one, talking with the juniors, 6 sessions. Quarter two was with seniors, completing the application, 4 to 6 sessions, and then the university search process was 8 sessions planned. That was our initial planning, but rather than waiting, we wanted to use that momentum and just got started in semester 2. It's just beginning of quarter 3, and we ran 5 sessions with our juniors. So even right there, you could see where we were starting to adapt. We had 8 sessions planned, didn't work out that way. We were able to do 5 because we really were trying to fit into what was already happening within the system and within the school year. You can see what we did for our second year, again, adapting a bit more, 4 sessions in the beginning with our juniors, only 1 actually with our seniors, and then 3 with our juniors in quarter 3. And even next year, and not just because of the uncertainties because of COVID, and in our case, the Filipino government and Duterte, we're adapting as well because our scheduling has changed. And so where juniors used to have quarter 1 and quarter 3 off from theory of knowledge, they now have quarter 3 on. So the only time that we have with our juniors is quarter 1. And so we're looking at 4 to 6 sessions solely focused on the university search process. So we've taken out some of the curriculum that we as comprehensive counselors really wish we could be doing, like talking about the IB diploma program, organization skills, et cetera, study skills, and instead we're focusing on the university search process because we knew that's what's going to be the selling point with our admin and with our students and parents. That's really one of the big things that really got this through, and most importantly, got buy-in from all of the different stakeholders. So we were ready to adapt. We continue and we did continue, and we continue to adapt the entire way through. Just really briefly putting this out there, especially if this is now inspiring someone else to try and make this pitch, another counselor out there. Lessons learned and challenges faced. We do have the buy-in now. The students see this as part of the curriculum. It was intentional on our part to really put this into all materials that we have, any conversations, new student interviews that we do. We have a strong set of curriculum and classroom lessons developed now that are very interactive. And most importantly, I think that we've increased the connections and relationships between the current students and the counselors. And part of that is because as a counselor, I'm not just teaching students who are in my caseload, I'm teaching students from all different caseloads. And so it gets the students interacting with more of us and building more of those connections and feeling I don't just need to go to my one counselor if he or she is not available. And they're seeing that we're there as a team to support all of them individually and as a batch. Some of the challenges faced with the scheduling, the changes, how to run these sessions if we're online. Of course, that's something that we're considering and thinking about for this coming school year. And really just embedding this into not just the counseling ethos and program, but into the school. And so this constant reminder to admin and teachers, yes, this is something that we're doing. It is new, even though we're going into year 3 of it, and finding ways to continue to integrate it into the calendaring and annual planning. So even once you get approval from admin, you've got to keep at it so it becomes institutional and not just temporary and such. So yeah, there we go. That's a case study from ISM.
Great. Thanks so much, Karen. So she pre-recorded that so that she could keep participating. I'm going to turn it over now for another example over to Craig from an example from Shawnigan Lake. Again, kind of big idea, how to move things along and some of the ways that we think about moving through the challenges and going from idea to execution. So Craig, I'll leave it to you.
All right, thanks, Matt. So similar to Karen, my project started from being at an international ACAC. Mine was last year at Western, and seeing what some of the other university platforms people were using, and knowing that we're on the west coast of Canada, so you might be aware that we kept Naviance. We were able to keep Naviance. Canadian schools and US schools were able to keep it while international schools lost. So we had a little bit more time to see what other schools were using and how they were using it. But we decided, we made the decision that we saw what was being proposed and wanted to move forward with that new university platform. I decided that we wanted to use Maya Learning. It was a time, at least last summer, a time of good fiscal time for us at Shawnigan Lake School. So there was an opportunity for new programs, new software, but there was also some new management, and they wanted to make sure that what we were getting was going to be, whatever we were spending money on was going to be to the best use of the students. And so purchasing, like I said, a new and expensive product was not going to be a cakewalk. We had to make sure that we were demonstrating why we're using it, why this was the right time, and how the students would best utilize that. So we'll go to the next slide, Matt, please. So as I said, if it ain't broken, I mean, Naviance was a system we'd been using for many years. It was working for us. We wanted to make it work better, and it wasn't being used by the students. It wasn't a very strong student-facing environment, and we weren't getting our students to do the research on their university planning like we wanted them to do, and what we needed them to do as a growing school. As we were getting more and more students, we had we have a large incoming grade 11 and 10 class. And so we needed those students to start the process earlier, to control their college search process a little bit more. It needed to be vetted by our senior administration, and they were unaware of what the product even was. I mean, when you're using something like Naviance or something like Maya, and you're bringing it to a senior leadership team who have never used it, who aren't even aware of how we move our students through, how we send transcripts to universities for our students. First, we had to sell what the idea of it was and why it made sense for us to get a new program. Next slide, please, Matt. So to provide this evidence, and to get that support, we needed to have some historical use of the service, what we've been using, to show how much we've been paying every year, to show what students, how often students used our process or used Naviance. And so we were able to give a good overview. We had a Google Doc that we took a survey of students to show how much had actually logged on to Naviance. We could see how often students logged on to Naviance, and we could see a decline year to year of our students actually logging on to Naviance more than 1 or 2 times. And so that was important because, again, it showed that the students were, and it could have been that we weren't training enough, but I think for the majority of it, they didn't enjoy the Naviance platform and they weren't able to use it easily, and it wasn't part of their day-to-day use as a grade 12 student. And one of the other things of so on top of providing evidence when you're pitching a program or you're pitching something new and something expensive for a school, that evidence to support that change is really important. But connecting the product to known and what I think is even more important, maybe anticipated demands of what your department is looking for. So I know that our senior administration was wanting us to connect more with our post-secondary alumni, so our really recent alumni, to see how they were transitioning into university, how they were graduating, and where they were graduating from university. And that was something we really hadn't done hadn't had the platform to support that kind of information. And we knew that was coming in down the pipeline for us and would be something expected of us. And so we were able to pitch this new program because we knew it would allow us to better track these graduating and more recent alumni. And so that certainly helped us in demonstrating the reason for bringing on a new university platform. Thank you. So when you're pitching a new program, and some of the things that I've learned from doing it in the past, and certainly on this one, that you can be very passionate about your presentation and very passionate about what you want. You're very excited about it, and you know it's going to be good for the school, but you don't take the time to look at the other side. So take a little bit of time to look at the reasons why you would not go ahead with this project, why it might not work, and that you're going to be that much better prepared to sell that idea to your management, to other administration, because you're aware of the challenges it might imply. It might be technical issues, it might be cost, but being aware of those when you go into any kind of presentation or before you pitch it to a supervisor, that's probably a good idea to get in place. And know your supporters a little bit, know who's on your side, know who can help you. As I put here, for our senior leadership, what's been really important to them is the connection to the technical side of the school. So we wanted to make sure we had IT on board, that IT could support us. They were happy with the product. And that's not something we did after we pitched the program. It's something we did before. So we spoke to our IT department, made sure they could integrate it, make sure it could be successful before we went to our senior management to make sure that that was the question we could answer with a positive as well. And a simple one, but sometimes one that's easy to forget, is that using of layman's terms. I mean, nothing can ruin a good proposal or pitch faster than to use maybe those abbreviations that we're also used to and the terms that we all know in our industry. But when you're pitching that to someone or to talking to people who don't use that, to make them feel that they are feel stupid or uninformed, that's not going to help your pitch at all. And so you want to make sure that you're using language and you're presenting it in a way that people from outside of your direct world can understand what you're trying to pitch. And that's it for me.
Great. All right. So thanks for that, Craig. Now we're going to hear a couple of ideas from the university side. So I'll turn it over to Megan, who's coming at this from a director position where she has recruiters pitching her ideas. So Megan.
Hi, everyone. So I'm from Huron at Western University. So we're the founding school of Western and a small liberal arts school that provides an elite yet accessible education to students from across the world. So I'm going to, as Matt said, I'm going to look at it from a different perspective with one of my staff members coming to me with an idea. So an example of this was a couple of years ago, a recruiter came to me with an idea of we should do an event for guidance counselors. So I know this is a very common event and many post-secondary institutions from around the world have annual events and so forth for their counselors. But this is something that Huron actually hasn't really done before. So at the time we've had many connections with counselors, but how many of them had never actually been to our campus before. So, asking why are we doing this event and not really having an answer to that, it was clear that it was just an idea from this staff member and that the process and kind of the direction had not been thought through. So before I responded to the suggestion, I just asked her to kind of gather some more information and then we would discuss. So getting her to answer some clear questions and really thinking through the process and why we're going to be doing this. Next slide, please, Matt. So as you can imagine, an event like hosting counselors on campus is not just a recruitment event, but it's an institution-wide event, so it does need buy-in. So this is something that I could approve initially, but it would also take meeting with other areas within the institution to create buy-in that way. So some of the suggestions that I had given the staff person for where to start is basic as who, what, when, where, why. So why are we doing this project? Who are we going to invite? There's counselors from all over our province, all over Canada, as well as all over the world. So who is our target market for this? How are we going to develop this guest list? And what is our capacity? Also, when is this going to take place? So with different curriculums and different times of year, we really needed to get a sense of when's a good time for counselors. And we know it's really challenging to leave your school as well as get approval for that time off. So wanted to get a sense from our, once our guest list was developed on what would be the best timing. So is it during the week? Is it on a weekend? Is it in the evening? Also, where is it going to be hosted? So looking at what our best kind of areas within our institution are, what's the capacity, are they already booked? And then catering, accessibility, and all of that. So looking at kind of how this event is going to take place. And then most importantly is what's the purpose? So what are counselors taking away from this event? One major thing that I think many don't actually look into is how their idea aligns with institutional priorities. So every university has a strategic plan that their senior leadership has developed. So with our strategic plan, we did at the time have a new president that had recently started with us. And one of the identified priorities was to develop stronger relationships with key Ontario and Canadian schools, renew partnerships with independent schools, and as well as strengthen our presence. So an idea like this really did closely align with what our institutional priorities are. And then a major thing is how much is it going to cost? So for facilities, do you need to rent tables and linens and so forth? What food are you going to serve? Transportation. Are counselors going to be provided transportation? Are we going to provide that for them? Where are they going to stay? Depending on the time of year, some like during this conference, typically people stay in residence, but during the academic year, there's not capacity in residence. So therefore, if it's a requirement to stay overnight, where a counselor is going to stay. What's the entertainment? Also staff time. So staff time is hours if you're paying staff overtime, if you're giving them lieu time. So those are all considerations to look into for the cost of the event. And then how is success measured? So, it could be as simple as counselors had a great time, but is that really how you identify success? So could it be through invitations to meet with our students? Are they more knowledgeable of your programs? Are you going to see an increase in applications and or registrations? So you need to clearly identify what success is going to be and how that's going to be measured. Next slide, please, Matt. So the end result of this event was that we did host our very first guidance fly-in. It was initially thought by the staff person of, going very large and opening up from counselors from across the world as well as across Canada. We thought maybe for our first time, we should probably hone in on in Canada for now, and then measuring the successes of that event and then opening it up to a larger scale in the future. So we invited counselors from all over Canada and flew them in. And they spent a couple days on campus, and the event was a great success. So with that, new relationships were established and previous relationships were strengthened. So we can with that, we saw a major change within leadership and our programming of our students. We're able to showcase that counselors who are already familiar with our campus learned about our new direction for our students, and then counselors who were less familiar had that information that they were able to share with their students. So the following year after this event, Huron actually saw its largest first year class within our 157-year history. So with having the knowledge base and having that experience, I could feel confident saying that that event was one of the contributing factors to what our success was. And then most importantly, our staff person who pitched the idea used this as a professional development opportunity, had the ownership of creating and implementing and executing a successful event, as well as had kind of the thought process and structure down for how to pitch future events within their career in the future.
Great, thanks, Megan. I'll wrap us up with one more example of a staff member coming up with an idea and again pitching to myself and how we work within my group to, as Megan just referenced, to help people develop ideas and then really take that ownership and take pride in not just the creative brainstorming portion, but then really thinking through all the nuts and bolts of an idea or a project or a concept and how to see it come from thought bubble into existence. And so today I'll talk a little bit about the case of the $1,500 confectionery kerfuffle. And really it's how we added cotton candy to one of our events, is how we say that in plain language. So a few years ago now, it was brought to our attention that our higher admin really felt like our open house was boring. It just lacked a little bit of life. It was a series of tables. And I presented to our manager at the time, who was overseeing open house, that we needed to liven this up. So we didn't have a specific example of how to do that, because of course there were a number of faculty and staff who'd been working this event for years. And it's very difficult with a large institution like Concordia to kind of just point to somebody and say, hey, kick it up a notch. And so Savvy kind of took that away. And within that, of course, the context, this was a year where the Quebec government had been reducing our public funding envelope. So money was tight. And when money is tight, higher admin staff tend to be concerned about results, but also pretty tight with the purse strings. And there was this ever growing concern about our local market share. So they really wanted the local people of Montreal, who typically were our open house attendees, to walk away with a stronger impression of the university. And within all this, as we were kind of thinking about the problem of open house and what to do, one of the things that we heard routinely through surveys from our students, from our prospective students, from our applicants, was that when they were comparing our institution to other institutions within Montreal, there was something about that experience with the people and the engagement with the facilities that would often lead people to select Concordia over some of our other competitors. And so as we were kind of taking all these contextual factors and thinking about what to do with open house, Savvy comes to me and says, look, I know money's tight, but I think adding cotton candy to our open house event solves a lot of our problems. And then she proceeds to walk me through exactly why she thought this solved a problem. So very quickly, kind of following the model that Megan encouraged her staff, Savvy comes and presents to me very clearly, okay, we know that the event is targeted to prospective students and their influencers, parents or counselors or family members. So the audience was very clearly identified, and the what was pretty clearly identified. Our event did not have food because that introduces a whole litany of other issues and logistical concerns. But the when, we had a date, our open house. So then it turned into the where and the why. So where, with a campus, we're a 2-campus institution. So we have a downtown campus and a second location 6 kilometers away in the closest suburb to Montreal. And the idea was we wanted this to be an anchor within the event to get people circulating, to basically liven up the event. And honestly, she picked cotton candy because, in her words, it's fun. It's whimsical. You don't expect this necessarily as part of your university search, but it added the right kind of element to our event that aligned particularly well with our brand. So, and as you see in the next point, thinking about that institutional priority, it's how to elevate that engagement with our brand. We're pushing that idea of experience, and here's this kind of small but significant addition to our event. In terms of actual cost, it really, the bigger issue was justifying that while other departments were seeing budget cuts. So what was really seen as an investment in the overall event experience, less so about the actual physical cost, taking away from maybe some signage or reducing our print run of brochures or what have you. So as a director, I wasn't worried about how I was going to find $1,500. It was how do we justify that with our larger budget. And then ultimately, how did we think about success? And again, this is where I was really impressed with Savvy coming to me and saying, based on guest feedback, where she kind of came up with this idea was encouraging our guests to spend longer at our event. What we had seen historically was students and their guests would show up, they would find their academic program, they'd ask some questions, and then they would leave. When we started rethinking how to make our event more engaging, more exciting, what we saw, and this showed up both in our feedback as well as observations about the traffic flow during the event, is in fact, we had people spending between 4 and 5 hours at our event because suddenly there was a reason to move around, check out other booths, to engage with our Dean of Students became this popular feature, not because people necessarily were interested in the programming under his office, but because of where he was located near the cotton candy. He's actually just kind of this engaging storyteller that has all kinds of interesting insights into the Concordia experience. So whether a student was from the US coming and asking about the international experience, whether it was a local student, suddenly we have this sort of basically walking engagement throughout our event. And part of his opening line was, have you checked out the cotton candy? Because it gives him an instant conversation starter. So for us, it was kind of this great example of somebody assessing the context, looking at what the institutional needs were, and then really walking through, okay, what is it going to take, not just to make this, not just to make this a realization, but how do we make sure that everybody sees it as successful? Because of course the risk to this was that this is university search. This is serious. This is we could be seen as childish or it takes away from the seriousness of the university experience. But we located that pitch inside of our institutional values. So you've heard from 4 different projects and kind of 4 different perspectives. I like to summarize things so that if you've made it this far through our recording, you can walk away with one slide that kind of summarizes when you're thinking about new ideas and you want to pitch those to your management, or you want to get yourself organized before you start shopping these around. How do you make sure that you can, you've got the most possibility for success? So this was modeled after a project plan. The link is in the presentation. Make sure that you can answer the following items in order to get your thoughts organized. As Craig said, be ready for the points of resistance so that you come off as prepared and ready to go. So know what you want to accomplish. Either think about the challenge or take that idea like Megan's recruiter where it's like, oh, we should do this thing. Okay, great. Articulate that. Simple language. We should be familiar with the concept of elevator pitch. We all do these fairly regularly as part of our work. Define the scope. What are the parameters? Is it a time limitation? Are there contextual limitations? Think about that from your perspective and from your institution's perspective. So thinking about timing, thinking about personnel changes. Is that opportunity or is that a challenge? And we focused a lot on the last 2 examples around the process, that who, what, when, where, and how. Those basic tenets that we teach in good paper development or identifying research process. So know the bits and pieces. That might not make it into your pitch, but you need to be ready to answer those questions, because some hesitation, you might miss your window. The deliverables, this is your return on investment. How do you know you're going to be successful? And think about the different elements of how we define success. So Megan talked about the increase in applications from across Canada as her event was building this awareness. Maybe it's event attendance or event engagement. Maybe it's related to your curriculum, or maybe it's a system that ultimately is creating that student experience, like in Craig's example. But make sure that you're clear as to why this is a benefit and how you will know you've been successful. Think about your resources. Financial, human are usually the ones that are going to make or break a project. If it takes money, then you better think through either how you reduce some other cost to kind of justify this, or thinking about that return that can ultimately offset that investment. And then don't underestimate human resource time. Honestly, the projects that I don't greenlight are rarely about the finance portion, and it's more about staff time. This is a great idea, but how can we humanly take this on? It's October 2019 and it's travel season. Now, maybe 2020 opens up a whole new opportunity for human resource time, so we'll see. Walk through your limitations and dependencies. Think about what it's going to take to complete your project. What are your risks? What are the things that are going to slow you down? And how do you deal with those? Is it planning ahead? Is it an alternate if somebody's on vacation? So think about, again, don't include all this in your pitch. Have this ready to go to talk about. The big piece I think about, deadlines and milestones. Work backwards. Make sure that you've got that realistic timeline and you know what has to happen when in order to make sure you hit your delivery date. Using my own example, our open house date was a very fixed concept. So how long does it take to sign a contract? How long does it take? Does the vendor need to be paid in advance or afterwards? What kind of approvals do I need from hospitality to bring food on campus? all of these impacted our project. And then finally, think about your own institutional approval process. Who's going to need to sign off on things? Is it the whole project? Is it components of the project? And then make sure you understand how long these things take. Again, thinking about my own project, this was bringing food on campus that added some time. Contract negotiation wasn't a big part of that, but we definitely had to make sure that the appropriate people in our services sector understood what was happening so that we didn't get shut down on the day of our event. And that, my friends, is the end of our presentation. I hope everybody was inspired by either some of the ideas that you heard from us, or more importantly, thought about ways to keep yourself organized so that you could be successful in taking that brainstorm idea and pitching it up to your administration to move things along. Certainly, it was an interesting opportunity for us to present virtually. There's nothing like the in-person networking, so we're all looking forward to being back and having a good time together in 2021. If you have questions about anything, we're all in the directories. Please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to say thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thanks, man. Still recording.